Welcome to the Alain Guillot podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Now, let me ask you this. Is there a secret formula for getting rich, for going viral, for deciding for how long to stick with your current job, your current boyfriend or girlfriend, or even the book that you are reading right now? Our guest today is David Sumpter. David is a professor of applied mathematics at Uppsala University in Sweden, and his scientific research ranges from ecology, biology to political science and sociology. He's been an international consultant in government, artificial intelligence, sports gambling, and finance. And today we will speak about his latest book, The 10 Equations That Rule the World, and how you can use them too. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, and thank you for a wonderful introduction.
So, David, I'm so full of questions. First of all, most of the
Mm.
people that I interview are in the United States. So, whenever I interview someone that is outside of the States or North America, I'm just my first question is, how did you get there? Or first of all, where are you right now? What is it that you study? What is it that attracted you towards mathematics? And then how is it that you became a professor?
Yeah, so
Just
yeah, all right. Okay, that's a big question. I mean, I'm sitting in my house in Uppsala in Sweden. I'm actually in my son's computer games room. He normally is playing PlayStation in here, and I think I moved to Sweden. I'm British originally, and I moved to Sweden because I met my wife essentially, and now we have two kids and live there. And the kids are actually grown up; they're 16 and 18 now. But I've always been interested in how mathematics and computer modeling can be used to understand the world in different ways. And I've let that sort of passion guide me. I started off working on simulating honeybees, how they choose a new nest, for example, what they do to communicate with each other. Then I looked at ants. Then I looked at fish schools, locust swarms, bird flocks, all of the behavior of them. And that kind of led me into soccer and analyzing movement of football players on the pitch, soccer players on the pitch, and also social, as you mentioned there, sociology. So I've looked at, for example, segregation in Swedish cities. I've looked at disease spread. And I've also been interested, we're going to get into this a little bit, in the gambling world, how that works and how you can use mathematics anywhere. So I'm just kind of driven by a sort of total curiosity. If somebody tells me a problem and they say, well, this has got nothing to do with mathematics, and then I say, well, maybe we can make this model and maybe we can try and
right.
understand it better using this piece of mathematics.
So it takes a certain personality to be attracted towards mathematics because for most people, well, I don't know, I'm speaking from my point of view, mathematics has always been a mystery and something that you have to spend hours trying to decide how this problem works or how can it be solved. Why is it that most people are afraid of mathematics?
You broke up a little bit there. And I think I don't know. I think it's a false fear of
Mm,
mathematics. For me, mathematics has always been about how I think. So I like to actually stress this, that I wasn't like a math genius at school. So it wasn't that I mean, I was pretty good in my class. So I think many of my fellow students would say I was pretty good, but I wasn't like, when I came to university, I wasn't the sort of smartest mathematician. I don't solve the most difficult problems. But for me, mathematics has always been about starting with a problem, taking that problem and using mathematics to kind of give you a little edge to sharpen up your thinking probabilistically. And that's what a lot of the ideas in the book are about. They're not a massive step away from your everyday experience. A lot of the stories are about things that we experience every day. And then I say, well, how can we actually just make this a little bit more formal, a little bit more mathematical, and actually calculate through those things?
Okay, to stay in the subject of mathematics, you are a professor of applied mathematics,
Mm.
which is different from theoretical mathematics. Can you tell us what's the difference?
Yeah, there is quite a big difference there, because I think most people in the popular sphere, they hear more about pure mathematics. They hear about these Fermat's last equation and these kind of really big results that you have to go away and think about for 12 years and come back and decide. But applied mathematics, is exactly that. It's like you start with the problem that you want to solve. You start with, oh, I want to understand how a fish school works. And you write out equations to describe each of the fish's movements. Then you either simulate those on a computer or you solve them mathematically, and you start to build up a picture of how a fish school works. And then it's the same if you're interested in basketball and you want to understand how the players interact with each other. You write down the equations for how they pass the ball to each other, and you start to build up a picture of that game. And it's the same in gambling as well, and it's the same in finance. Each time you write down a set of simple equations, and those are the 10 equations that you can actually use to understand these different types of systems.
Okay, so this is off topic of the book, but it's just personal curiosity.
Mm,
So I live in Quebec, in Montreal, Quebec, and here we
mm.
have two societies: the French society and the English society, trying to carve out a space, cultural space for each side. I wonder in Sweden, what is it like? How many languages people speak there, and how do they interact with each other?
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, there's different answers to that question. So one thing is English is big here.
Okay.
So Swedish, of course, is spoken, but there is a kind of group of people who only speak English. I speak Swedish, but we have quite a lot of English immigrants. We also have had a massive change in our society in that we've taken in immigrants from primarily from Syria over recent years, but also with the Bosnian War in the 90s, we took in a lot of immigrants came to Sweden from then. So society has changed quite a lot during those that period. But I think it's not the big cultural difference that you maybe have between the French and the English speaking, but there is still those kind of cultural differences that are starting to emerge. On the whole, people in Sweden are quite positive about the immigration that's come. There's been ups and downs about that. There's always people who are negative about it. But on the whole, Sweden very much prides itself in welcoming in people, maybe telling them a little bit about how the Swedes work and the Swedish way of doing things, that you should do it in this way because we've thought about it. Swedes are quite rational people, I think, but they're actually very welcoming as well to having new people come to live here.
And one last question, in that on that subject. So you, I assume you teach in English. Is there enough of
Mm.
an English-speaking population in order for you to teach at a? I assume, I don't know if how certain is this, but an English-speaking university.
No, so I teach in both Swedish and English. So
Okay.
the undergraduate lectures, the first 3 years of a university education, they're primarily in Swedish. Sometimes you'll have some English teachers, but you have most of your teaching in Swedish. So I teach in Swedish. So I have these big classes of um, I don't know, 300 students who are there, and I'm teaching them Bayes equation, or I'm teaching them the confidence equation, and then I do that in Swedish. Then at master's level, then most of the teaching is English, and then we have quite a lot of students who come to study in Uppsala University from abroad, for example. I think we have some Canadians as well.
Okay, great. Okay, so in regards to mathematics, I mean, you work on areas that are in high demand in artificial intelligence, sport
Mm.
gambling, and finance. You know, like if you apply for any hedge fund, I'm sure many of them will be fighting for you because you could perhaps be able to detect how to get that fraction of a penny in any transaction. I don't
Mm.
know.
Mm.
So how come you ended up being a professor instead of a hedge fund mathematical genius somewhere in somebody's basement?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I'd find it boring actually being stuck with one thing. So I mean, I'm very lucky because I have a position as a professor, and I was always interested in research primarily, how you actually use mathematics to understand the world. And so I was never, I mean, I'm not saying I'm not completely uninterested in money, but I've always been comfortably well off, and I've never felt that temptation to work so many hours a day, because I think this comes up quite a lot, and it comes up in the book. If you do take that route of like, I'm going to work in finance and I'm going to work in gambling, you have to work extremely hard to find those edges. And maybe that's not always appealing. I like to move between different
Right.
areas and sort of use my mathematical skills that way and not get caught up in one particular area.
Okay, so tell us about the book. How do you discover that there are 10 equations that rule the world? I mean, you are doing mathematics, but then at a
Mm.
given moment, you have to say, wow, wait a second. This equation here and this equation here are the equations that we can use to rule everything that we do in life.
It was a bit of a revelation for me, actually. I was very surprised. So I started off, I know you do a lot of book reviews here, and I started off reading Jordan Peterson, and he had 12
Wow.
ideas or 12, and I kind of thought, some of it was interesting and so on, and I kind of liked some of the style of writing that he had. But it seemed very arbitrary. It just seemed like, one of them was stand up straight and don't shrug or something like this, things
Clean
which
your
I do
room.
quite a lot. Yeah, yes. And so I thought, there's got to be something more systematic about it than that. And then I started thinking about it. And actually, it was really just in one afternoon. It was boom, 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 boom. Here are the 10 equations. And I mentioned my teaching when I stand in front of these students and teach them the first course in statistics. And I thought about, what are the equations that we go through in our education? And what are the equations that I use in each of the parts of my research and when I do the applications of my mathematics. And it was very systematic and much more straightforward. And I thought, well, if Jordan Peterson can be a best-selling author with his kind of random advice, then I think actually I could have a go at trying to actually write down one after another what these particular equations are.
Perfect. Okay, so you have 10 different equations, and we
Mm.
only have a certain amount of time for to talk about some of them. So, out of the 10, I wonder if you could just highlight one or two for the listeners and
Mm.
tell us how to apply them to our life.
Yeah, I think what one will I start with? Do you have any suggestion what you'd like to start with? We start with finance, gambling, sports. Is there
Well, I am an investor. I'm constantly
yeah.
investing. So let's do something finance related.
Yeah, let's start with a I think the finance one would be nice to talk to, and then I'll go on to a more personal one later, because the book really tries to get to both the kind of hardcore and the sort of softcore thing. But I look in chapter 6, I look at the market equation, and this is an equation we call in mathematics the diffusion equation. And what it describes is it actually has three components, and you'll know this from yourself from investing. There's a signal, that's what you want to find out. There's a noise, that's the kind of randomness around how your shares are going up and down. And then there's a feedback, and the feedback is when people come in and they decide to buy something because they think other people are buying it. And I outline actually, if you're trying to buy a new pair of headphones. So this was a problem that came up in my life. I wanted to buy a new pair of headphones, and for example, you've got Sony. They're a very reliable type of headphone. They work well. They've been around for a long time. So for me, they're the signal. Then if you want to take the noise, I was looking at this other Japanese brand of headphones, which they told me in the shop that this was used by Japanese DJs and it was very good, but I didn't know much about it. And so that's the noisy one. There's a lot of variation around that. And then there's the feedback. And if you think about Dr. Dre's headphones, what are they called now again? Now I've forgotten what they're
Beach.
called.
It's
Beats, exactly, Beats. So that's what I take in the. They have a lot of feedback around them. There's people buy them because other people buy them, and they're very open about how they promote them. And what your job as an investor really is to try and separate those three different categories and work out what's going on for the in the particular share that you're interested in buying. So that's one part of it. But the mathematicians, now what the mathematicians do is that they actually never think about those particular noise, signal, and feedback. What they do instead is they have a mathematical model which describes those types of things, and then they try to find small imbalances in how you're investing, and they find their edges based not on knowing anything about the shares, like I'm encouraging you to do, but finding small imbalances where one is trading in one place to one degree, or if you have a bunch of 100 shares together in an aggregate, you try to find imbalances within those 100 shares and how the aggregate is priced. That's how they do. So they build up models that are based on those three principles, but then they use those principles to find imbalances in the market.
Well, okay, okay. I find my biggest challenge in investing is eliminating the noise because the noise is always there. And my biggest advantage is patience. So,
Well, that's really important. I mean, I I had the I described this in the book, but I went to one of the big US news channels, and you see on the screen all the shares are trading at this and that, and basically what you actually see when you look at one of these share trading shows is the noise. All you're
right.
presented with all the time is the noise, and so you need that patience to pick out the signal in all of that.
Okay, well, I read the first chapter, the judgment equation, and how we
Mm.
can especially decide if someone is a bitch or a nice
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, yeah,
Can
I went with a pretty strong example there at the
Yeah,
start,
well,
but
there are actual examples. So I wonder, and this is something that we encounter every day. How do we decide if we like or dislike a person, or if
mm,
we should give them a second chance?
mm.
And you encourage us to give people a second and third and a fourth chance. So can you tell us how to
Yeah,
apply the judgment equation?
let me just go through the maths of that. So what's happened here is you've started a new. I described the situation, and as a situation that many of us are familiar with. We hear somebody saying something nasty behind our backs, and we've just met this person, but they disappoint us and let us down in some way. And are we going to conclude that this person is a total idiot and we don't like them? And what you do is you actually start by thinking, what proportion of people are nice and what proportion of people aren't nice? And so I suggest, and you can take this number to be whatever you want, but I would say, like, say 95% of people are nice. And so when I meet you for the first time, 95% of people are nice people, and we like them. And then the other 5% are idiots. And then we say, well, someone said something bad, right? So this person who said something bad, um, idiots say bad things maybe 50% of the time. Well, nice people say bad things 10% of the time. So even a nice person like myself or like you, we can make a mistake and we can say bad things. So what I've built up there, that's the data that you've got in your head. It doesn't have to be objective. You can put in your numbers into this, but then you can use the judgment equation to start reasoning about this. And if I say, so think about this, think about 100 people, 5 of them are the idiots that we don't like. And half of the time they say bad things. So that's 2 or 3 people
Mm.
possibly be those bad things. Now, of the 95 people who we think are nice, they make mistakes 10% of the time, I said. So that's about 9.5, 10 people who make mistakes. So we've got 2 or 3 people, 2.5 people versus 10 people who are nice. It's 2.5 nasty people, 10 nice people. The chances are that this person who said something nasty about you is one of these 10 people and not one of those 2.5 people. So judgment equation allows you to put this sort of subjective information you have about people together, and it tends to be very forgiving. It says that you should forgive people the first time they make a mistake, the second time they make a mistake, maybe the third time, then you should start to be a bit more suspicious about them. But you should allow people to make mistakes before you judge them.
I have a hard time applying the judgment equation in this scenario. So
Mm,
let's say the airline companies screwed up my travel plans, okay? And
mm,
I call, and the poor person who answered is some customer service guy or girl in India
mm.
who has nothing to do with the screwed up thing. So I have a hard time saying, all the nasty things that I want to say, because I know it's not the guys the or girls person fault in India, but at the same time, I have this
Mm.
rage that I want to express.
That's a really difficult one. I think, I mean, and the rage gets even worse when you know that almost nobody you talk to anymore can do anything to
Mm,
help you. They've all been given, and this actually relates to some of the things that come up in the book. That person you're talking to in India has been given an algorithm that they're just going to follow, and you'll say this thing and they'll say, oh, well, I'm very sorry, sir, but this thing, and they're not given any freedom to
Right.
actually decide what they tell you. So that's an extremely frustrating, an extra frustrating situation for you. And that idea, it comes up a little bit in the book, that there's a kind of small group of people, and I call them 10 in the book, and
Mm.
there's this kind of society. They're deciding the algorithms which control the world. They're deciding what that person sitting in India answering your questions is saying. And then you are just applied, that algorithm is just applied to you, and there's no way of getting past it in any
Mm.
way at all. A lot of the kind of individual decision making that we had maybe 30 or 40 years ago has been replaced by these mathematical algorithms that, well, people like me, unfortunately, have some responsibility for creating.
Mm. Can we talk for a few minutes about the chapter number 3, the
Mm,
confidence equation? I find that this is a major impediment for a lot of people. They know the know-how of this or that, but they lack the confidence, and they are always stuck in the same position in life.
mm. I think the confidence equation for me is not so much about self-confidence. It's more about having confidence in when you make a particular type of decision, a confidence that you're
Mm.
correct in those types of decisions. So one thing that I look at is, actually, you were talking earlier about different cultures living together, and I mentioned that there's a lot of immigrants who are coming to live in Sweden. And so one thing I look at there is, a colleague of mine, what she did is she sent in CVs to apply for various jobs in Sweden. And she sent in one with, some of them had names with African backgrounds and Muslim backgrounds. Some she sent in with Swedish names, Sven Johansson and so on. And then she found that she got called back twice as often for the Swedish sounding names than she got called back for the African and Muslim sounding names. And that's how you can actually be confident that you're being discriminated against. So a lot of people feel that they're being discriminated against, but if you apply for a job and I apply for a job and I get it and you don't, we'll just say, well, that was bad luck or whatever, because it's just one time that that's happened. But by doing this type of test where you send in 100 CVs of two different types and you get back the results, you can actually establish confidence that this really is the underlying sort of problem. And this is something you can, I mean, she actually told me that people do this, so people will ring in for a job and they'll say their proper name, and then they'll wait 10 minutes because they get a refusal, and they'll ring in and say a Swedish name, and suddenly they'll get a call back. So you can actually do these types of tests
Mm.
yourself. In the book, I describe how you can also do it for things like movie reviews and book reviews and much more light-hearted things as well. But this is a sort of serious part of how we catch these types of discrimination in society.
I'm just going to share an experience quite fast. My
Mm,
name is a French name, Alain
mm,
Guillot. So
mm,
whenever I was applying for jobs, I got plenty of interviews. But as
mm.
soon as I got in front of the other person and I have a big Spanish accent and I spoke for only 5 minutes, they would tell me, "Oh, we're sorry, the position has been filled."
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I think that's exactly what I'm talking about, because you come away from that situation and you can't really say anything from one of those interviews. You can feel a frustration yourself, you can think that you've been discriminated against, but because you only have that one experience, you can't say anything. And I think that's what's so important about those types of experiments, that you can actually now rigorously say, well, it really is the case that you have these types of discrimination, and discrimination is real. I mean, still, even after these studies have been done time after time after time, they've been done in the US. I don't know about one in Canada, but they they still have those types of biases. People know about the results of the studies earlier, but you still see these types of biases.
I have a niece, and my niece tells me that this secret society called the Illuminati that
Yes.
rules the world. But here you are telling us that the secret society is mathematicians, in fact, that rule the world. Can you expand a
Yeah.
little bit on that?
Well, it's exactly the same, that my son and daughter have been talking about Illuminati and Illuminati confirmed, and they're very interested in those types of things. And what I thought about, I've never thought before that mathematics is a secret society, but exactly when I wrote down those 10 equations, as I said earlier, I started to think, wait a minute, what's going on here? And the fact is that I can go into a research article, I can understand the symbols that are there, and I can apply those equations in finance, or I can apply those equations in gambling and start to benefit from those types of things. So it's a secret society, but it's hidden in plain sight. It's hidden right in front of our eyes in the form of mathematical equations. If you take the time to learn step by step how these equations work, then you too can be a part of this secret society. So I started with this, and I think it's, there's a problem that we have this kind of secret group of people who are controlling social media, controlling the finance world. But you can start today. You can start studying these equations and you can become part of it. So I kind of want to open Illuminati. So this is where it's not like Illuminati. Illuminati wants to stay secret. I kind of want to open up 10, the secret society, for everybody, so they can find out about it for themselves.
You're opening up the kimono and revealing everything.
Yes, exactly.
So, David, the last question, of course, is can you tell us one more time the title of the book and where can people follow the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so the title of the book is The 10 Equations That Rule the World, and it's available from the 24th of August at all good bookstores. It's nice if you buy it from a bookstore and maybe not Amazon, but you could, of course, buy it from Amazon as well. And yes, and you can also, I think, the best way, if you want to know what I'm doing and find out about my daily work, is to follow me on Twitter at Soccermatics, which is the name of my previous book. So follow me at Twitter on Soccermatics and find out more about how equations rule the world.
David, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It was really lovely speaking to you.